Hey everybody, my name's Mike Jerome. I am the Senior Product Manager for AWS Amplify Hosting. Today I'm going to give you a quick tour of AWS Amplify, and then we're going to drop into a technical demo, and I'm going to show you how to set up a Next.js application with authentication, all managed by AWS Amplify. So to give you a little bit more detail on that agenda, I will cover what Amplify is, if you're not familiar with it, a little bit more of a dive into the Amplify hosting features. We'll cover Next.js because that's the application framework that we're going to be using today. And then we'll drop into the demo. And then finally, some of the guides, etc., will be available as QR codes so you can follow along and try this demo out for yourself. Okay. So what is AWS Amplify? So it's actually a suite of services provided by AWS, roughly in 4 groups. So we have Amplify Studio. Amplify Studio is actually like a visual builder. So you can create your user interface and it'll automatically create the backends for you. So you could imagine creating a form with fields. You can do it in a visual way, and it will also deploy the database to store that information in the background. We have Amplify CLI, which stands for Command Line Interface. And that is the mechanism you use to configure and maintain your app. It allows you to set up things like authentication, storage, APIs, and we'll be using that today in the demo. Next, we have Amplify libraries. Libraries are things that you can use to access backend services, and they also include UI components. And you'll see today with authentication, we're going to use a UI component to pop up a login screen and a create your account screen. And then we have Amplify Hosting, which is where we're going to run our demo today. So it's a continuous integration, continuous deployment, CI/CD mechanism that allows you to take a modern web app, either a static or server-side rendered if you're using Next.js application, and host that. So we're going to dive into a little bit more about why you would use Amplify Hosting and some of its features. So a great reason to use Amplify Hosting is its performance, it's reliable, secure, cost-effective, scalable, and it has a low operational overhead. So to dive into each one of those, it's performant because it is globally distributed on AWS CloudFront CDN. So when you're serving your app or wherever in the world your users are for your app, they will be close to an edge node and they will see very fast, low latency performance. It's highly reliable. It's a managed service where we manage the uptime for you and moving parts, so there's no upgrades. It's secure. So we're doing as much as possible with pre-built static apps. So you don't have to think about patching your framework version or worrying about SQL injections. It's cost effective because you pay for what you use. So if your traffic scales to 0, then so does your egress costs. And that makes it very, very cost effective. It's also scalable. So if you do get a burst of traffic, it's a serverless environment and we can serve a very large number of concurrent users. And because it's a managed service, it also has a low operational overhead. And to give you an idea of what that means, I will show you a diagram in a moment. So the features in particular, so it's connected with Git repositories. So your application code can live on GitLab, GitHub, AWS Code Commit, Bitbucket. We can read your code, and then as you commit changes or you make pull requests, we can act on those and build the application for you. When we see changes in the Git repo, we then run a full CI/CD pipeline with tests, so we can compile your app, we can run tests against it, and we can make sure that it's in the right place before it's deployed. We can do things like preview branches. So if you have a development branch or a test branch, you can run that in parallel with your main branch and check your changes before you push to production. As I said before, CDN is included. So you have hundreds of points of presence around the world with Amazon's CloudFront. We can also manage SSL and domain names, and we'll have a look at that in the dashboard later. So you can add your own domain name, and we will take care of setting up the DNS for you with AWS Route 53, and we will also provision and manage SSL certificates so the site is secure. And because it's part of the Amplify suite, it integrates well with the other Amplify services. And again, what we'll look at today is an example where the hosting is integrating with authentication. So this is the slide I alluded to earlier in terms of a managed service. So if you were to build Amplify hosting for yourself, this is roughly the components that you would have to manage under the hood. And we take care of this for you as a managed service. From a developer workflow, you commit your code into a Git repository, which can be code commit. We'll take care of the continuous build, test, and delivery through code build, deployment, managing your assets, etc., and then pushing those out. So that's the bottom row. And then in terms of your customers, we'll take care of managing your Amazon Route 53 entries, your SSL certificates, your CloudFront distributions and configurations, Amazon S3 buckets to hold your assets, and any kind of gateway and Lambda runtime environments for compute. And we'll see all of these components in use as we go through the demo today. A little bit about Next.js. So Next.js describes itself as the React framework. It offers an on-Rails approach to working with React. You get out of the box static and server-side rendering. You get TypeScript support and a great developer experience. It's a very, very popular framework. There's over 90,000 stars on GitHub. It's far more opinionated than React, so it expects certain configurations and setups and conventions, which is great for bringing developers up to speed. And again, the popularity means there's a lot of developer familiarity. So teams will pick it, knowing that as new developers join their team, they'll be used to the opinions and conventions and be productive quickly. Okay, and with that quick intro, I am going to switch over to the demo. And so today we're going to build and deploy an application from scratch. It's a Next.js web application, and it has authentication included. And the authentication is provided by AWS Amplify. Now, the demo I'm going to run through is outlined in a blog on our mobile site. This is the blog here, and there'll be a QR code for the URL at the end of the demo. We're going to be moving between a web browser, a command line, and a code editor. So this is a pretty technical demo. So to kick things off, what I'm going to do is start at the command line, and I'm going to use create next app. And I'm going to create an app that's called Amplify Next.js. I'm going to work in JavaScript, and I've disabled some of the linting tools. So I have created my app here, and I'm just going to change into that directory. Okay, and then I'm going to initialize this project with an Amplify init. So what this is doing, it's taking my AWS credentials and it is building me on the back end the infrastructure that I need to host and run both the front end and the back end authentication environment for our demo app. So what we will see as this runs through is we'll see AWS resources, things like roles, buckets, user pools, etc., will be created. Just take just a moment while things are initialized. And then once that's initialized and we have our bare bones Amplify app, we can start to add backend services to it. So for today's demo, we're going to add an authentication service. So I run the command amplify add auth, and I'm taken through a wizard to set up how I would like authentication to work. Today we're going to go with the default configuration. We're going to log in using a username and password. And today we're not going to change any of the advanced configuration. So that has initialized locally the definition of an Amplify app and added authentication. So what I'm now going to do is I am going to push that up to Amplify, and that will prepare those resources for me in the background. So that's pushing right now. Under the hood, that's running some CloudFormation templates and preparing things for us. And you can see there's the CloudFormation and the app, and the resources are being created in the background. Okay, that's going to take a few minutes. While that progresses, we're going to move over to setting up our local development environment. So at the moment, we have a bare bones Next app that we created with Create Next App. I'm just going to change into the directory. And there's a few additional things that we need to install. So within our Next.js app, we need to install the Amplify library and also some of the UI tools that we talked about earlier. So there's a couple of npm packages to install here. Once our packages are installed locally, we can take a look at our application in a code editor. I'm going to use Visual Studio here. What we'll see if you're a Next.js developer is a relatively familiar layout. So it's a Next.js app. It has the concepts of pages, an API. This has got an index page. And if we were to run a local server, we would see welcome to Next.js. So if I do npm run dev, open a new tab in my browser, we'll see welcome to Next.js. So the application is a completely new Next.js application, and it's running on my local machine here. Now this page is open to everybody, and we're going to change this page so that it sits behind authentication. So the first thing we're going to do is alter our main app.js, which is shared by all of the pages. And we're going to add a few extra lines into the top of the page here. So where we have our CSS, we're going to add a few extra things. So we've got the Amplify styles, and we'll see that defines what the login looks like. We're going to be using Amplify and some AWS exports, and we are enabling SSR mode here. So that is created for the app. And you can see now, if I go back to the local page, there isn't much difference to be seen as the page is reloaded because we haven't actually edited the home page or the landing page, so it's still open. So the landing page with all of this text on it, we're going to completely replace it, and we're actually going to replace it with a page that's much, much simpler so that we can see what's going on here. So I'm going to delete everything that is in this file and replace it with just these 30 lines. So you can see we're bringing in the with authenticator components. This is what provides the authentication. Now on this page, there's two functions to look at. The first function is called get server-side props. Now this is code that only runs server-side, so either on your local machine or in the Amplify hosting environment. So the page is actually rendered server-side. And what we're doing for the purposes of the demo is just showing the time and date that the page was built. And every time we refresh that page, we'll see that time and date be updated. And I'm also going to add in a log line that just says I ran, and we'll be able to see that in the server logs. And you can see it's actually appeared down in the corner here. It ran already. So if we go back to our site now, we can see again we're still running locally, but now the page is not being shown to us. So what we would expect to see is logged in as and my username, but because we wrapped the entire page in the with authenticator components, we're not showing the content, and we're actually redirected to sign in. And this styling and this branding is provided by the Amplify UI components. Okay, so what we need to do now is create an account so we can log in and see that page and see the server-side rendering happening. So if I choose to create a new account now, I'm going to give myself the very imaginative username of Mike, set myself a password, and then enter my email address. What that's going to do is send a confirmation code over to my email client to just prove that I have used a valid email address. That code's being delivered to me to the side of the screen here. I have the code. I'm going to confirm my email address, and now we can see that I am logged in, and I'm recording this at 5 to 4 or 7 minutes to 4, and every time I refresh the page, we'll see that time change, 3:54:19, 3:54:23, and you can see each time that I ran is appearing in the console. So this whole page is being rendered server side, and I can log back out. If I'm logged back out, I can no longer no view the page. I cannot see the whatever secret I was hiding behind the login. I'll log back in again. So the login is actually happening on the Amplify side. So although the Next application is running locally on my machine, the authentication is being provided by Amplify within the cloud. Okay, so the next thing to do now is to take this app and move it up into a hosted environment so it's running for the world to see rather than just on my laptop. So to do that, I'm going to commit my changes in Git. I'm going to cancel my server here. I'm going to add my changes. They're now committed to Git. And this is a completely new Git repo. So I'm going to create a new Git repo using GitHub. So I'm going to go over here and create a new repository. I'll be the owner of it, and I will call it Amplify-Next.js. I'm going to set this as a private to me repository, create it. And when I do that, GitHub helpfully gives me the instructions to associate this new repo with my local code and push up my main branch. So I'm going to copy those commands and I'm going to paste them into the terminal. And now when I refresh the screen on GitHub, we can see my code has been pushed up and the pages that we were just working on are on GitHub. Okay. Now I'm going to switch over to the Amplify console so we can put this code up onto Amplify Hosting. You'll see here I've got one application, which is Amplify Next.js. This was created when I did the Amplify init in the command line. And if I dive into the details of this app, you'll see right now it has a backend environment and it has authentication, which is where we did Amplify add auth and we configured that. We'll have a look at that in just a moment. On the front end or the hosting environment, we haven't got anything set up yet. So we're going to connect this app to the code that we just pushed to GitHub. Select GitHub, and then I choose a branch to commit. So Amplify is now checking in with my GitHub account, scanning my repos. And here's the one that we just created, Amplify-Next.js. It's correctly identified that I have a main branch, which is the branch that I want to use and I want to publish online. I click Next. And then here I'm able to see that it's automatically detected that I'm using Next.js with SSR and I am using Amplify as my backend. We've already got the app and the environment that we created with the authentication is called dev. I've already got a role here to access the services. If you don't have one, you can click create new role and it will take you through the process. It's a case of clicking next, next, next to generate a role. These are my build settings, which we'll cover in a moment. But for now, I'm going to click next. This confirms everything and I'm going to deploy this application. Okay, so now what we're looking at is an overview of the app that we've created within Amplify. So we already saw the backend environment with authentication. And now we have the hosting environment, and we have a main branch, and you will see many branches listed down here. If, for example, you had a develop or a test branch, you would connect those through, and you could have multiple branches working off the same repo, which is a great way for staging and testing and making sure you're happy before you push things to production. And the process that we're going to go through now is we're going to provision those resources. So that includes checking that everything is right in terms of the backend and the authentication's configured. It's also provisioning the hosting resources, which includes things like the CloudFront distribution, any Lambdas that we might need to run server-side code, etc. And then it will actually run a full build of the Next.js application and deploy that out to the edge. And then eventually we will end up with an application that is deployed. If I hit the URL that I've got here, we won't see the app yet because it's in the building stage. I'm going to open that in a browser tab, and we can see that the app will be here once the first deployment has been completed. So while that's running, I'll give you a quick tour of the things that are available to you in the hosting dashboard. I'm going to start with the backend environment. So you saw here that we had authentication. And if I click on the link, we can see the Amplify Studio, and you can see these are some of the backend services. So you have authentication, APIs, file storage, analytics, and functions. And the authentication is actually managed by Cognito. I can find out more about my configuration, and I can actually jump over to Cognito and find out the specifics. If I was to check out my users here, we'd expect to see one user, which was the ID that I created when I was testing locally. And there is my user, Mike. So this is full Amazon Cognito, but it's managed for you by the AWS Amplify backend services. So that's kind of a quick tour of the auth and jumping straight into Cognito. And I'll also show is some of the front end options. So within every app, we have the general settings where we can see a little bit more about the app. We've got details that we might need, things like the service role that's running the code for us, where we are. So this particular app is located in US East 1 for this demo. And I'm using a web compute platform, which allows us to run compute for Next.js and server-side rendering. You can find out information or reconnect the Git repo that you're using. Again, we're going to leave ours as is. And you can connect one or more branches. So we have the main branch connected here, and you can see that auto build is enabled. So what this means is every time I commit to my main branch and push to GitHub, that branch will be rebuilt, and we will go back through that build process to deploy and provision out the updates to the code. Again, typically you would have more than one branch, like you'd have a develop branch. So you'd push your changes there, test them, make sure you were happy with them, and then you would be able to merge them into main and do the deploy in main. So we touched on domain management. So we've been given an amplifyapp.com domain for our app. And you can also see we've got the app ID and also the fact that we're running on the main branch. If you want to, you can add your own custom domain name. Click add domain. If you've got domains that are already set up in Route 53, and I've got 3 examples here, you can choose one of those. It'll automatically be configured to have www or a subdomain of your choice routed to your Amplify app, and it will manage the process of deploying the SSL cert, etc. for you. So that's a really nice option. That's all just taken care of. You end up with SSL and a custom domain name and all the DNS managed. There's some real deep dive build settings we can go into around how we deal with the back end and the front end. For this demo app, what we say is every time we do a deploy, we make sure that any configuration we've changed in the back end is up to date. And for the front end, we run any continuous integration tests that we've got configured. We run a build, and we also make a cache of the node modules, so we're not having to download those every time on subsequent builds, which makes things faster. And there's some more advanced settings in here we'll save for another day. Now, something that's really nice is, as well as having multiple branches, you can have preview environments, and you can set up a pull request. So every time a pull request is created, Amplify will actually spin up a new branch. It's a complete copy of the app, and it will allow you to test out the pull request before you merge it into any particular branch. We have notifications. So as builds pass or fail, you can build notifications so that you know the status of your app and the build environment. We have secure environment variables. So there's configuration that can go in here, but this is also a great place to manage secrets, things like database credentials that you wouldn't want to commit to your code base. We also have access control. So today we're showing a demo of an app that has authentication and is managed by Cognito. But what's also possible to do is put a global username and password over the top of a branch. Typically, you would do this with a develop or test branch. So if we had a second or third branch here, we would be able to click on the branch, choose manage access, and make sure that that wasn't publicly accessible, which is a great thing to do when you're working in a test environment. Of course, we've got monitoring available to us. So we have metrics in terms of the traffic that's coming into your site. You can set up alarms, for example, if you want to be alerted if there's a surge of traffic coming to the website. We have access logs, which can be downloaded and analyzed. And we also have the compute logs, which are very, very similar to what you were seeing when we were running the server locally. They're stored on CloudWatch. So again, you can then run searches against those. You can do alerting, deep dive searching, etc., etc. We also have rewrites and redirects. So for example, if you wanted your naked domain to redirect to www, or you had changed a path from /documentation to /docs, you can set up the rules in here so that we can manage those for you. And then it's also possible to set up custom headings for your application. So that's a quick tour of the dashboard. I'm going to go back now to the main part of the app, and we can see we're moving along the process here. So we did the provision, we've done the build, and we're now on the deploy stage. If I click in the build, you can see it was successfully completed. We cloned the GitHub repo. We ensured the backend environment, which is the authentication, is fully up to date. And then on the front end, we used code build to set up and configure the Next.js application. And you can see within the front end build environment, you've got all of the things that you would expect to see from a Next.js application, including which pages were rendered statically, which pages are going to be rendered on the server. And we talked about the page we're interested in, which is the root page here. And you can see it has that little Lambda icon next to it, and it confirms down here that that is a server-side rendered page. And now we are going through the deployment stage. So the deployment stage is pushing the code out to the edge. So the app is available globally in hundreds of locations. And we should see in a moment that ticks green. In fact, I'm actually going to go back to our demo and just try reloading here. And within a moment or so, we will see this come up with our app as soon as we see that go green. Okay, we're green now. Just the first load of the application. Okay, so there we are. So now, instead of running the app locally, it's been fully deployed to Amplify. So we're seeing it on the internet at mainbranch.myappid.amplifyapp.com, and I'm presented with the same page that we saw locally, where I had the option to sign in or create an account. Now, because the backend is being served by Amplify in the cloud, I can actually use my same login that I was using in the development environment, because when we configured this app, we said we would like to use the same development environment. So I can take that same user of Mike and type in my password. and we'll see I'm logged in as Mike, and this has been server-side rendered now at 7 minutes past 4. If I refresh the screen, see it moves to 8 minutes past, and I can log back out again. So now my site's been fully deployed on a global CDN. All of the authentication is taken care of for me by Amplify, and we're all up and running. So if I now want to make another commit to my branch or create a new branch or set up a pull request, then they will automatically be deployed to AWS's global infrastructure. So that is the end of our technical demo today. The QR code here will deploy a Next.js 13 app with authentication to AWS Amplify. The URL in that QR code will go through the demo that we've been today, so you can try it out for yourself. And if you have any questions or want to connect with the team or other users, then we have a Discord server, and you can scan the QR code for that to connect, ask questions, and find out about events. So that wraps up today's technical demo. Thank you very much for watching.